The search for new Attorney General of New York intensifies, candidates getting vetted, interviewed, and frontrunners emerging. We'll discuss the names and what happens next. Then yet another controversial deal for the White House. This one involves the president, a Chinese phone company, in a multi-million-dollar deal for the Trump Organization in Indonesia. The dots connect, and they raise a whole lot of unseemly questions. Then, as Uber and Airbnb see their business pick up, there's a new push to crack down. We're going to take a look at whether they have an unfair advantage over competitors like hotels and taxis. Evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. We'll have all that, and also we'll head out to Long Island and see how Dominic's got the latest for us out of that Mangano corruption trial. Now, the process, though, first to replace disgraced New York Attorney General, it has kicked off in Albany as we speak. As we've been telling you, Schneiderman, he had to resign suddenly last week after the New Yorker posted an article saying 4 women accused him of emotional and serious physical abuse. Also, they remark that he had a major alcoholic problem. Now, lawmakers are interviewing the 13 people listed on your screen today, and one of them will keep the job for the rest of the year, that is until the election. One of them, the acting AG, Barbara Underwood, many people saying that she's emerging as a consensus favorite. Even some of her competitors are also saying the same. Here she is today describing why the position is so important in light of what is going on in Washington.
We have resisted many efforts by the current federal administration that we believe violate the law and will harm New York residents and New York institutions. In many ways, I feel this work is the most important work I have ever done, and I assure you the work will continue uninterrupted if the legislature allows me to serve out the current term.
So once the legislature decides on the interim AG, then the focus goes to who will be the full-time AG come November. We have an election for that all of New Yorkers will vote on. Now, a lot of big names are on the list of possible candidates. You see them on your screen. You got Preet Bharara, Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney, Letitia James, Zephyr Teachout, and a bunch of state lawmakers as well. Kathleen Rice, she was on a graphic yesterday, but today she pulled out. She couldn't run for re-election to Congress while also running for AG, so she decides she's going to stick with her current day job representing Nassau County in Congress. Now, all of the people we've been talking about, they're vying for one of the most coveted and prestigious elected positions in America. I'm talking about the New York Attorney General because, let's face it, they get to pick the cases they want to pursue. The pool, it's deep and huge. Wall Street's in its jurisdiction, so arguably as the President of the United States, since he is a New Yorker whose business is headquartered here as well. And in case you hadn't noticed, Donald Trump, he has always had a lot of legal entanglements in the Big Apple. Now, the AG position is also considered a springboard to higher office. The past 2 AGs, they wound up living in the governor's mansion. Didn't work out so well for Spitzer, but so far so good for Andrew Cuomo. All right, now with that, let me bring in our panel. Richard Brodsky, former Democratic New York State Assemblyman, and remember the state legislature is going to be picking the interim AG here. He represented Westchester. He's now a professor at NYU. I was about to say that if you got that, and also a one-time candidate for Attorney General. I'm sure though if they twist his arm,
we would have mentioned it eventually.
I
was worried.
Oh, I did that to bother him. Scott Vanderhoff, Republican Rockland County Executive for 5 terms. Now, co-chairman of the Palisades Institute of Dominican College, and Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. All right, let's first do not so much the process, but pull the curtain back. What's going on in Albany right now when they pick the interim person? What are they looking for? And I know they're looking for a good person with a good legal head on their shoulders and whatsoever, but what's the other parlor games going on?
The part that's interesting in what you said is that it's the interim. It's not, and that is a recent development. Until late last week, it was widely viewed that whoever got the designation from the legislature would likely be the Democratic candidate.
Yep.
That blew up when it was mishandled by everybody involved.
Yeah, because my question is, we were all hearing Letitia James was actively campaigning to be the interim person because you think you get to campaign basically as an incumbent, you have a leg up for November. That went away. Why?
Well, it went away because there was some very sloppy politics where a very qualified Bronx Borough president seemed to be involved in trading his support for AG in turn for his taking the vacancy when the AG space was filled. That got everybody nervous. So there was a quick change, and in the end, this person, when selected, will not likely be an active candidate for the nomination of the Democratic Party.
So the consequence is everybody that wants to be the full-time person says, don't pick me. And they pull out here because of what you're saying, that you can have the job till November, but by no means is the state party or whatever going to get behind you.
Pulling out for other reasons. Both Sean Maloney and Kathleen Rice have ballot problems. Some of the other people, Senator Gianaris, have political problems, because the part I left out was, in the end, the governor's concern for a ticket is a legitimate political issue. He's entitled to his views. He has enormous influence in the party. And by separating this out, the politics of the nomination got dragged away from the politics of the interim appointment. And in the end, that's a good thing.
I'm hearing and I'm sensing that Barbara Underwood, who's in the position as the acting capacity because she's the state solicitor general, is likely to get this appointment on the interim basis. I'm curious, Richard, if you're hearing anything else.
I think that's the conventional wisdom. Some of the other candidates are not serious. Some of them are. In the end, she's a very good lawyer. I mean, a really good lawyer. She knows the issues. She can do the job as an interim. But from that little clip, you can see why we have political leaders in this job as well.
Now, explain to everybody. I've maintained it's just about the best gig politically you can have for some of the reasons I mentioned. You get to pick the causes you want to champion. You get to pick the bad guys you want to get in front of here. And you get to basically play on a local, a statewide, or even a national landscape if you choose it. You don't have to have a bad day unless you make it for yourself in many ways here. And certainly that argument's been proven by the people who've come through that job.
I think that's precisely correct. You get to choose America's bad guys. And you get, if you're a good enough lawyer, to enforce some degree of law and rule of law and appropriateness on people who are doing wrong.
And almost shape policy, too. If you pick
Not
a
almost.
cause, you do shape policy.
The Martin Act it's extraordinarily powerful. It's a no-lose gig.
Ironically enough, it has not been historically a springboard to higher office. If you go before Spitzer, you're looking at Jacob Javits and Aaron Burr as like two of the only 3 state AGs that have actually gone on to higher office. Remarkably, it's a much more modern trend, but it's certainly a strong one in modern times.
I'm not sure that this is over yet, though. The Democrats have, I think, and I'm not an insider, okay, on this, but they want an incumbent. Just because a few of the better-known folks have dropped out doesn't mean that the governor won't have his way and actually have someone else other than Barbara Underwood selected.
And to put a finer point on that, some of the people who want the job in November, the high-profile names, Andrew Cuomo will do everything in his power to make sure that Preet Bharara is not going to be the Attorney General of New York if he has his choice. Zephyr Teachout, a primary opponent that gave him a scare not too long ago, he doesn't want her there as AG. He'd love to be able to, yes, have a ticket that would help him, but also make sure whoever he's got statewide. I mean, look what he did to Tom DiNapoli, right? I mean, for that poor guy, finally he's out of the crosshairs for the moment, but he wants his own guy here, and those people aren't going to step aside just because he doesn't want him there.
I think that's a critical point. I really do. He needs a running mate and he wants one that he can work with, that he trusts, et cetera, et cetera. If he leaves this wide open, he doesn't know where it's going to go.
No, he knows where it's going to go. He has enormous influence over the state committee. The issue in the convention is who gets 25% other than the designated candidate. If you want a trick ending, it's that he forces Barbara Underwood on the convention. The problem is that Tish James is a popular African-American woman with a citywide base. Very hard for him to go out to the electorate on his own this September.
Okay, but let me do this, and I'll take the unpopular
James.
position for a second. Tish James, you look at her resume. I mean, she was assistant prosecutor, I think, she was in Spitzer when he was AG, right? My point is, Preet Bharara is the sharpest tack of the bunch here.
Depends on what you want. If you want
but that's
a
my
criminal...
point. But let me ask you more specifically. Do you, because you know this job, Richard, Is it important to be a politician? I'm not just talking to be able to deliver a better
Yes.
soundbite than Ms. Underwood. Or how much is it that you have to be a prosecutor?
No, you need to be in contact with voters. You need to understand what the problems are that voters face in their lives that the law applies to. And the office has been well filled historically by people who are politically competent and also good lawyers. If you can find that combination, that's the best way to do it. And
Which is more important than the other? Don't say both. Politician or being a prosecutor? I'm talking for the Attorney General now.
politician is not the word I would use. Elected official, yes. Someone experienced in democratic government, not just the world's best corporate lawyer.
So let me ask you, do you think, I mean, again, Preet Bharara, he was the guy with the Moreland Commission. Do you think in a million years, well, could Cuomo stifle that?
Sure. If you want a criminal prosecutor, Bharara's got a really good profile.
And I'm
That
sorry, I keep
job-
interrupting you, but part of this job and part of consideration for the electorate in November is the New York AG's position specifically was seen as a backstop in the Trump investigation by Mueller because of all the pardon powers that wouldn't apply to New York.
know what? I'm not
and
there.
Schneiderman, by the way, he actively was saying that he would play a role as with other
I'm
state
not
AGs.
there. The Attorney General's job is to be the lawyer for the people of the state of New York. If that involves Trump, that's well and good. But I didn't agree with Ms. Underwood that the most important work she's doing is on Trump. It's a political answer. Political answers are okay.
Well, that's
The lawyer for the people is what that job is.
And by the
you
way,
have to know what the
Schneiderman was
people
not
do.
that. Okay, Schneiderman was a political, pandering, liberal politician, and he did everything he could to try to become the anti-Trump. Okay, and I think if you look over his record, I think he was pretty bad. Okay, I think he was bad on a lot of the policy. But every time there was a fire, when I'm talking a public discourse fire, that guy had his ambulance, was there. That's not what an attorney general should
That's exactly
be.
what an attorney general did. That was the same criticism leveled at Bob Abrams, at Andrew Cuomo, at Elliot
He
Spitzer.
went way overboard, Richard.
Eric Schneiderman did good, competent work on behalf of the people of the state, in addition to what you're talking about. And
If
he
you
was
look
not.
at it, if you look at it apolitically for a second, he went overboard. He constantly went overboard. He tried to set himself
because
up.
you don't agree with him.
Well, I don't agree with him, but he went overboard in many cases.
I don't see.
I'm going to stick my head in the lion's mouth here. Andrew Cuomo, he probably won't follow this advice, but he would be well served to keep his hands off or handle this with a very light touch.
But you're right about him not listening to
Well, he's listening to it. I don't really care whether you're listening or not.
No, I'm listening.
But
He's
it's an election year. He's on the ballot. He's already got the Buffalo Billions. He's got Percoco. He's seeking a third term. There is a little bit of fatigue going on. If he's seen as overly manipulative in this process, if it bleeds out into public display, if he actively tries to keep Preet Bharara off the ballot, even if Bharara's on a different party line,
I think that's right.
I think it would make him look terrible
It's-
and look like an over
I think
manipulator
it's a
and
good
put
point.
himself in
I think
difficulty.
he runs a risk if it gets out that he's trying to be
The
Big
risk
Brother.
of having a Zephyr Teachout as AG is worse politically and
Same
to
thing. I
Andrew
mean, it's
Cuomo
basically the
than-
same thing for Cuomo.
than
When it's Teachout
using
or-
your
or
influence with the
Bharara.
party.
That's a good point. Actually, I agree with that point.
Well, there we go.
So when do they decide? When does Albany say
Next
it's
week.
Underwood? Next week. Okay, interesting. All right, coming up next, everyone. President Trump's about-face on a Chinese phone company. You've heard the acronym ZTE. Shocked a lot of folks here. They were blocked from selling phones in the U.S., but now the president says, no, never mind, let them in. That comes right after China miraculously cut a deal that helps the Trump family business in Asia. Coincidence or quid pro quo?